Hello YouTube. Today's video I'm going to talk about F5 IngressLink. And so you might ask me why, and the reason is because we've actually made some interesting and good updates that I've actually honestly been wanting to do for a while, but kind of really needed a customer use case, and therefore within the last couple of months we've actually got the use case, actually made the changes, implemented the changes, and we got one very happy customer. So for the organizations, the testing, the development, the customer that integrated this, the changes, it's actually pretty good. So honestly, if I look at the numbers that I have, worldwide, I can probably see around maybe a couple of hundred IngressLink deployments, which is, to be honest with you, actually not too bad. So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, what is IngressLink, and then second of all, why the changes. So I'm going to briefly introduce IngressLink and the purpose in a Kubernetes environment, and then I'm going to highlight some of the challenges faced by customers. And then I really want to emphasize the kind of critical role I think IngressLink plays in the industry to identify these challenges, and then I'll unveil the new key features of the updates. So first of all, I'm going to shout out to Jason for helping me with these slides, because actually they're actually pretty good, and this is kind of what we presented at AppWorld. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about here is kind of what is IngressLink. And so IngressLink, think of it as a seamless, somewhat of an integration, really more of a control plane integration between BIG-IP and Nginx Ingress controller. So in this instance, or in this environment right here, your Ingress controller is Nginx. So for your Kubernetes environments, all of the data plane Ingress control, all of the routing within the cluster is all happening within the Nginx Ingress controller framework. Now this can be Nginx Plus, or this can be Nginx open source. It's really up to you. Preferably, I'd like it to be Plus. There's reasons for that. Most of it is around support. So think of the connected tissue here, kind of like between the two systems. And this is what kind of brings the power of BIG-IP as a front-end application delivery controller, providing some of the edge and advanced services. Now, you might ask me, why do I need to use a BIG-IP here since I only have a single cluster? Well, that's really interesting, because some of the challenges that we have and that we're seeing is that organizations are moving to a smaller cluster. And so within that smaller cluster, what they really want is a multi-cluster strategy. And we're seeing some of this potentially with maybe one cluster just being regular modern app, and maybe the second cluster being more AI based. And so if that's really your use case, I'd love to hear from you. And so what F5 CIS is doing here is it's monitoring the same API, but it's really the connected tissue. It's really the orchestration of the BIG-IP, providing that public IP and forwarding all traffic into the cluster to the Nginx Ingress controller, then to go and do all the HTTP routing. So think of it as a unified control plane, allowing for both BIG-IP forwarding to the Nginx Ingress controller. This is just standard Nginx Ingress controller. You might ask me, well, what happens if I want to use the new Kubernetes gateway APIs? We'll talk about that. And I think that's kind of what we call future state. And so you ask why? Well, IngressLink really resolves kind of persona challenges that we're seeing between infrastructure and DevOps, or between that NetOps and that DevOps. I think it aligns the priorities quite well with minimizing conflict between the teams. It fosters better collaboration between the network organizations, the Kubernetes organizations, at the same time reducing errors, because the way that the IngressLink CRDs is written is we've created and added all the defaults. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the next stage. And so if you kind of look at this architecture, you can actually see here that we have all the infrastructure players out here. So the burden of modern app practices kind of move off the big IP and kind of onto the Nginx Ingress controller. We see this in the industry. All layer 7 application routing is done within the cluster. Blue, green, and canary type deployments. We got circuit breaker patterns, service discovery, easy scale horizontally with the app. So you can scale the apps as much as you want. You can scale the data plane within the cluster. So now, what happens if I have multiple clusters? So that's really kind of where we go to take a look at the next phase here, is when we actually start to introduce the multi-cluster scenario. So this is actually unveiling some of the key new features and upgrades. So we really want to explore the latest enhancements in IngressLink and kind of focus on some of the performance perspectives here, and kind of like I want to explain some of these technical details for the upgrade, making it essential both for technical and non-technical, right? So kind of like get the understanding of both, and then we'll kind of show the upgrade optimizations and kind of potentially how we can utilize and reduce kind of latency across the environment, and potentially how we can actually mitigate or help with failure scenarios, which I think is kind of interesting. So the IngressLink update, I think, really boosts performance kind of for your production environments. It removes that that challenge with regards to kind of multiple or single Kubernetes environments when you want to make updates, when you want to take a Kubernetes environment and kind of make changes. Maybe you want to do kind of like resiliency. So what happens now is Big IP ultimately becomes your distribution or your traffic aggregation across multiple clusters. And so this is quite nice here. If you look at OpenShift 4.1, 4.13, these are quite old versions of OpenShift. What happens if I was wanting to now I have a problem is where I'm getting to a point where these versions of OpenShift are actually running into challenges with regards to support. So now I need to implement OpenShift 4.17. So do you take down your entire current environment? Do you upgrade that current environment? Going from 4.11 to 4.70 is actually quite a big shift because of the CNI changes. So maybe it's better just to pave a new rack and actually to use OpenShift virtualization with the benefits of OpenShift 4.17. And maybe that's a major change, but actually at the end of the day, it's just Kubernetes. So the application remains the same. So build that environment in parallel and actually horizontally scale that using a ratio. And so what happens now with the introduction of IngressLink for multi-cluster, you actually start to see the multi-cluster solution coming into IngressLink. And the IngressLink CR kind of takes care of all of that. So really the kind of three takeaways here is really designed to simplify and secure your multi-cluster Kubernetes deployments with a central control plane for your entire distribution. The Big IP offers kind of advanced features for really traffic management. So that traffic management using the ratio for kind of like moving stuff around. Now we talk a little bit about application security. So to do application security, we really have to look at the URIs. And so previous IngressLink was all transport servers, all layer 4. And so some of the big significant changes here that I'm going to start to get into is where we actually start to elevate our IngressLink configuration for this environment. So this IngressLink configuration, where we talk about here advancing and adding some of the security layers, is kind of really what we need to do, but we really need to be at layer 7. So we really need to kind of see what's happening at the traffic layer, look at the URI, maybe not necessarily differentiate specific URIs per cluster, but really differentiate a good URI versus a bad URI. So be able to kind of look at layer 7, take kind of apply all of our maybe security policies, specifically WAF policies, and see if there's any signature matches, block it, stop it right there from coming into the cluster or clusters. And so this is kind of standard configuration for IngressLink. You can add the proxy protocol here. You can install the Nginx Ingress controller. You can see right here the latest versions of the CRD. You can actually pull the Helm charts in, and you can configure the CIS integration on the Nginx piece where you're making some of this, and you're changing some of the specific apps right here. So you've got cluster on the traffic policy. You've the name of the the reporting status here is IngressLink Nginx controller, the proxy. So this is the configuration that you need to do on the Nginx piece, and talks a little bit about the status. On the F5 piece, we kind of monitor the service. And so you can actually see here, this is the service of the Nginx Ingress controller. It's Nginx Ingress. This is pretty much the same. I like this app because this is actually referenced within the CR. And you can see here's the ports, port 80, port 443, and in kind of port 81. This is really just for the restness. This is for the liveness probe. And this is the health monitor between the big IP and the Nginx Ingress controller. You can actually then go ahead and kind of install this home chart. Very simple here. This is the difference, folks. This is kind of here, I believe, where the benefits come in. And this is how I can quantify the benefits and demonstration, right? With kind of like impacting this. And this is a really good kind of like clear example of kind of, I think, how this upgrade kind of results in the benefit that kind of like we're providing. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here so that you can actually go ahead and see this. So I think this is actually what's really cool. So this is the CR that we've created. This CR kind of interacts between, you can actually see the CR here. The kind of CR will kind of interact, the kind of CR is kind of like here. It interacts with CIS, the big IP, and then it monitors the multi-cluster. It's going to monitor the Nginx Ingress controller here. This is just a legacy app, but basically this is of any service. And so that's what we're monitoring. We're monitoring here. So we're monitoring this namespace. You can specify a host if you want. And so here is the multi-cluster piece. This is super significant. So now what you can see is the actual benefits and how easy the CR is. So, for example, cluster 1. Cluster 1 is just a name, but what cluster 1 does reference is it actually references the call it the gateway integration, really, and where CIS can find the certificates ultimately to use kube client, which is basically your certificates that you would need for the kubectl, because that's what CIS is using. It's using kubectl, kind of like kube client, to kind of access the informers of all the clusters. And in this case, the only informer that it's watching is of the Nginx Ingress controller. So if you see a replication of the Nginx Ingress controller, CIS will detect that based on the kube API and plumb the big IP with a update of an IP address or pool member. So for example, if you bring in a new Ingress controller or kind of like move it down or move it up, you're going to get new IPs. CIS will detect that and add that to the big IP right away. So therefore, your big IP will forward the traffic to the Nginx Ingress controller. So you can kind of see here the multi-cluster service, cluster 1, cluster 2. This is kind of the service that we're monitoring. This is the same service that we saw above. And so what big IP will do is it will create a public IP for the following pools and ports. It'll do that automatically. You don't have to worry about it. It'll automatically create that. A couple other things that I like here. We're actually using a shared monitor. Quite nice here. You don't have to worry about creating the monitor. You just create a shared monitor on big IP. We just reference that. If you want to create your own, you can. Now, this is what's interesting. We actually enabling what we call re-encrypt here. And the reason why we want to do re-encrypt is that because we actually want to look for certain information. So here we want to actually look for something like an I rule. We want to do some I rule processing. Why do we want to do that? Potentially look for some failures coming back from the app. So if we actually see some 503s, remap that traffic to another cluster. That's one exact use case. That's the exact use case we built this for. So if we see a failure on the application side, and we're not probing for that failure, we're not monitoring the application. But if the application is not listening and it sends back an error to the client, well, Big IP can see that error because it has an I rule or it has logic that is looking for 503s. Then what Big IP will do is it will just remap that connection over to a new cluster, and the client would never know. And so it will be serviced by a new environment. So you could literally take down all your apps, and Big IP will actually move that traffic for you. That is really cool what you get here. To be able to do that, we couldn't use IngressLink in its previous state because it was just at layer 4. It would work for HTTP, but it wouldn't work for HTTPS because we don't see the headers. We need to see the method. And so in this case, what we've done here is we've moved IngressLink up to layer 7, and we're actually doing client TLS, server TLS. So here we're referencing secrets within Kubernetes, but you can also reference secrets on Big IP. You can just reference the kind of like the Big IP's TLS or profiles, both from client and server. So this is a complete re-encrypt here. And then, of course, this is the public IP. So, folks, this is really, really, really simple. And so I think with this upgrade, you can kind of see what you're getting here. You're getting the multi-cluster and you're getting layer 7. If you don't have multi-cluster, you can still use layer 7. Here, you just remove this, and this is just your single service, right? Your single service of being Nginx Ingress controller. But what we've given you here is we've given you IngressLink for multi-cluster as well as IngressLink for layer 7. And this where you bring in your WAF. You can list your WAF policies here. You can list your iRules, etc. So this is really valuable. And I think this is how I can kind of emphasize this user-friendly kind of ease of adoption of this upgrade. I just don't think we can get any simpler than this. It's very, very, very trivial from a configuration perspective. And so once you've done this, then all your traffic will either go to cluster 1, cluster 2 for all of your Nginx Ingress controllers. Folks, that is a major benefit because now you're distributing traffic at the application layer using the Big IP, which basically sits in front of the cluster. So now you get that cluster resiliency, cluster high availability. You get all of the richness that you do on the Big IP edge using iRules, using application WAF, using monitoring, and using encryption, decryption in hardware. Plus the public IP. You can inject that public IP into DNS. Now you can have, at that point, site-wide resiliency as well. And so this is the major benefit that you can see here. You can see the testing that was kind of done in this place right here, and kind of the steps. And so this is very, very, very simple. Cluster 1 and cluster 2 doesn't have to be the same hardware. It could be two different hardwares. One could be public cloud. One could be on-prem with kind of that interconnected link between the two. Maybe it's somewhat of a colo. One could be one hyperscaler, another one could be a different hyperscaler. One could have different CPUs than the other CPU. We don't really differentiate similarities here. That's what we mean by implementing this in what we call default mode. Default mode is that you basically provide all of the similarities. So it's not so much a ratio with an even split. You kind of specify the kind of values that you want with your ratios and your weight basically in here. Here we've used a default ratio of a 50-50 split, but you can change that ratio that using a weight. So I talked a lot here ultimately about IngressLink. And so I just want to kind of go back to what you see. These changes here are going to take place in version 2.20. You can see this has been put into the stable branch. And so this will actually get merged up to our 2.20, which would be this month, the April 2025 release. And so you basically get this features and functionality with your Big IP and Nginx. Again, you can use kind of like any version of Big IP, the CIS 2.20 release, which is up and coming, and then any version of Nginx Ingress controller that you want. So you might ask me, okay, so what's next? What's next for IngressLink? And so I want to talk a little bit about the roadmap for IngressLink. So now that we've done this potential, so we have continued innovation here, but you folks need to drive the innovation, right? I can only do so much by myself with regards to innovation with kind of like our customer use cases. So the use cases are really important. I need to get that from the community like I've done right here. This is a great use case from the community. I thank those folks that I've been working with pretty closely for the updates that I've been wanting to do. So we can do these kind of updates, we can make this innovation, but it needs to come from the community. The second piece that I want to briefly touch on is the emerging trends in technology that kind of like will further enhance our Kubernetes kind of performance, right? And so I want to kind of encourage you folks to kind of provide me with that. So one kind of thing that I have I'm envisioning here is to kind of go to the next stage. So right now we have IngressLink, and IngressLink is great for traditional ingress into a cluster. But the community's kind of moved away from Ingress. The community's kind of moved towards gateway. And I actually heard from a customer, don't call it Ingress being kind of legacy, let's go ahead and call it gateway. So the second thing I actually want to do, and I actually did document this briefly, where I actually started to kind of look at what I would call as the gateway fabric. And so here's multi-cluster gateway fabric. Now this is using traditional CRDs, right? This is not using IngressLink. IngressLink is the simplicity. Think of it as that cloud easy button. Give me a public IP, load balance all of my applications, assume all defaults. So what I'm envisioning here as kind of future phase for emerging technologies is actually start to get into what we call gateway API. And so your big IP becomes your gateway. And we're interacting with the gateway API. And so infrastructure class or your gateway class is kind of really what a CIS is manipulating here, or CIS is monitoring, working with Nginx gateway fabric. And I kind of have an assumption that maybe it's gateway link. I don't know. It's just a name. But that's kind of what I'm starting to write up next. And that's kind of like what I would love to push into the next kind of like minor version of CIS, being CIS 2.21. So if you're a gateway API F5 customer, or if you're interested in gateway API, you would love to benchmark, try this, kind of like get some visions here, kind of look and see what this kind of looks like. I want to hear from you, or if your partner, you're an F5 or you got a customer that is interested in gateway API, we basically want to elevate IngressLink into maybe gateway link, where it's kind of like exactly the same, very similar. The difference being is that IngressLink is focused on traditional Ingress. Ingress is using CRDs, and moving to gateway link, you're kind of moving towards more of the gateway API integration. And so I've already met with the Nginx folks. They're really excited about this transition. And the next phase would be me starting to work on a requirements document. But I would love to have the community back in, customers, or a couple of customers that I can kind of run some stuff through, kind of get their perspective on kind of what this looks like. And that's what I'm looking for. So I am calling viewers for kind of like enhancements or advancements into this gateway link. Kind of like get your perspective of what we're doing. I can create really cool stuff, but at the end of the day, it needs to be used, and the community needs to use it, right? And so the enhancements of moving towards kind of like gateway API, gateway link, I think kind of makes a lot of sense. Simplify the complexity between big IP and the gateway fabric. Now, I would kind of keep that a little open. So I think Gateway Link is kind of cool. Gateway Link is integration with Nginx 100%. Maybe we keep it kind of open a little bit there to allow some of the other community projects. Maybe Gateway Link is could also be kind of linked to some of the open source stuff or community-based stuff like Envoy Gateway. Maybe some of the other types of Kubernetes projects out there. I don't know. That's why I need your feedback. So I know that's kind of a quick recording. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, I really like the slide that Jason and I kind of put together. This kind of slide right here, where we kind of foster the relationship between the two different endpoints, but both between the NetOps and DevOps, using IngressLink for your traditional Ingress, using CRDs, and potentially Gateway Link for the next generation Kubernetes API using Gateway API between Big IP and your traditional gateways, whether that being, in this case, the primary use case is the Nginx Gateway Fabric. So if you like this video and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I'm at 1,200 subscribers or just around there. I need you to like this video so we can get some traction within the Kubernetes and algorithms on YouTube. And if you have questions, concerns, you want to work with me on getting some of this early adoption, please don't hesitate to send me a comment, and now we can set up a meeting. And thank you very much.